Good evening, everyone. Take your seats. Get ready for an amazing conversation. I'm so excited. I'm Margot Norton. I'm the chief curator here at Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. And I'm so honored to be here today to introduce today's discussion, which is the last panel conversation for Making Their Mark. These opportunities to bring together artists and writers and curators and thinkers around these brilliant artists' work has just been extraordinary. The whole kind of trajectory of working on this exhibition has been really special. So tonight's conversation is called Disobedient Bodies, which is a kind of sub-theme in the exhibition, which I'll speak a little bit about, with two artists from the exhibition, Firelei Báez and Suzanne Jackson, and moderated by Hilton Als. And the program, of course, is in conjunction with Making Their Mark, which is up through this Sunday. So tell everyone you know to get their butts to Berkeley and see the show. And if you have seen the show already, we have till Sunday to linger in these works. I know I will be doing so. I also wanted to take this opportunity as the exhibition is coming to a close to thank Kamal Shah and Shah Garg for the opportunity to work on this exhibition. It's been extraordinary to be able to bring these works by these path-breaking artists to our institution, to Berkeley, to the Bay Area, and to be able to tell their stories. And I'm really excited that, this kind of journey of working together doesn't end with this exhibition. We are embarking on a project called the Shah Garg Women's Artist Research Fund, which is really going to be transformative for our institution. The fund will support the scholarship, the exhibitions, the public programs, the books that we do here at the museum with women artists in a major way. We have an upcoming exhibition after the close of Making Their Mark, opening in June 6th, called Rooted West. It's going to be looking at African American quilt making in the context of the Second Great Migration. And it's a really important exhibition for us because it's the first group exhibition that is looking at the African American quilt collection here at BAM PFA, which was a major bequest that we received a few years ago. And also upcoming, we have a exhibition that we just announced that's opening in next year on the work of Teresa Hakyang Cha. And so the Shah Garg Women Artist Research Fund will also be supporting our exhibition and Teresa's work, which is a really major deal for us. So thank you for everything. Before I kind of hand it off to Hilton and Suzanne and Firelei, I will give a little bit of a background to the conversation around the exhibition and then brief bios for everyone. One of the wonderful things about working on this iteration of the exhibition together with Cecilia Alemani is that we were really able to hone in on the thematic threads of the exhibition in New York. With this theme, we can kind of think about the ways that artists have created works that defy conventional methods of representation, a sense of painting the experiences of bodies from within. There's a lot of interiority in these works, works that refuse objectification and rather depict a sense of perpetual motion and in a constant porous relationship to others, to the environment, and to all that surrounds it. Many of works in this exhibition kind of hover between abstraction and figuration and do so as a means to shift across the material, the social, and the spiritual. I am also honored to introduce our distinguished guests this evening before an introduction by Hilton Als, followed by presentations by Suzanne and Firelei, and then a conversation between the three of them, leaving room at the end for questions from the audience. So please take note of any of the questions that come up during the presentations and discussion and share them at the end. Also, a quick reminder to silence your cell phones. Suzanne Jackson, whose work Cut Slip for Flowers is included in Making Their Mark, studied painting, theater, and dance in San Francisco before moving to Los Angeles in 1967, where she studied drawing with Charles White at Otis Art Institute. Her painting, drawing, printmaking, bookmaking, and theater design have been exhibited in solo exhibition at the Jepson Center, Telfair Museums in Savannah in 2019, and included in the 2024 Whitney Biennial, and group exhibitions including Just Above Midtown, 1974 to the Present, at the Museum of Modern Art, New York, and Joan Didion, What She Means, curated by Hilton Als at the Hammer Museum in 2003, among others. Suzanne has a really major exhibition coming up soon here in the Bay Area, and I'm really excited to see it. Yeah, cannot wait. Firelei Báez, whose work For Amethyst and Athenaire exiled muses beyond Jean-Luc Nancy's canon, Anna Kaanas, did I say that correctly? Anna Kaanas, 2018, is also included in Making Their Mark, and is an artist who was born in the Dominican Republic and studied fine art at the Cooper Union, Hunter College, and the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. Her 2024 survey exhibition debuted at the ICA Boston and traveled to the Vancouver Art Gallery and will open in June this year at the Des Moines Art Center. She's also been the subject of solo presentations at the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art in Denmark, the Museum of Modern Art New York, and the Studio Museum in Harlem. She was included in the 59th Venice Biennale in 2022, curated by Cecilia Alemani, as well as group exhibitions at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., the Cleveland Museum of Art, the Art Gallery of Toronto, and the Rockvan Art Museum in Shanghai. Hilton Als, who will moderate today's conversation, has been a staff writer at The New Yorker since 1994 and a theater critic since 2002, and in 2017 received the Pulitzer Prize for Criticism for his work in The New Yorker. Als is the author of many amazing books, including The Women, White Girls, and My Pinup, and editor of God Made My Face, a collective portrait of James Baldwin from last year. We are very lucky to have him as a teaching professor here at UC Berkeley. He's also the Associate Professor of Writing at Columbia University and has taught at Yale University, Wesleyan University, and Smith College. And now, Hilton.
Thank you so much. I'm almost embarrassed by the amount of kindness that's been shown to me here at Berkeley, so I want to thank you all for taking the time and also having the foresight to see this beautiful show. I think I'll begin by saying that I have to thank BAMFA's powerful executive director, Julia Rodriguez, for making this show and evening possible in the museum's wonderful open galleries and now in this beautiful hall. And also Kamal Shah and Gaurav Garg for granting me the privilege to say a few words here to commemorate their landscape collection, that which forms the basis of Making Their Mark, curated by the extraordinary and now very energetic Margot Norton, chief curator at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. I don't think it would be too much to say, first off, that the show's importance, that the various realities and thoughts behind it are important because it combines several factors of loving, I think, and critical significance, including Kamal's search for truth in art and Margot's thoughtfulness and brio, not to mention, of course, the diversity of vision one sees in the art itself. Each of these factors converge to produce in these galleries a kind of force field established by women you cannot say no to, artists who don't know, women you cannot say no to, artists who don't even know where the margins are because they work outside of all parameters to make a world. This world is welcoming but individualistic, often private, steeped in the color of being now, feeling now. And to that end, Making Their Mark becomes right before your very eyes a spectacle in the best possible sense of the word, a showing out, a flare sent out to unsuspecting skies, put together with an eye for the long view, a history that matters. That intelligence and care has helped create or form a kind of narrative. Let's call it a narrative of presence and remembrance by and about the female person as individual and member of the collective of being. A narrative in which the artist's power is part of her gender but not exclusive to it. A narrative that remembers that for any artist, the political is always personal. A narrative that does not obstruct the artist's ability, her need to say I in her own way, using her own materials and in her own voice. Indeed, there is no creation, no art without voice, and that's precisely what Kamal seems to be attracted to, time and again. A woman's voice. How does she tell her story? How does she speak? And with what hands? And once she has spoken, how do we care for and exhibit what she has to say? What is her tone? And how does she remember not only the self, but the world that made her and continues to make her? We live in urgent times when folks speak over and around and on top of one another, and there's always too much to say and not enough time to say it. But these artists are saying it in voices and with voices and eyes and hearts that are as powerful and mysterious as the landscapes of their minds, filled with colors and maps and ways of being, ways of seeing that are used in service of making worlds we may recognize but have never seen before. Indeed, that was what first attracted me to the great Suzanne Jackson's work. I had never seen it before. All those whooping and glad cries of color in work that's always one thing and then it becomes another. As soon as you move through, as soon as you move toward a distinguishing line or gesture in Suzanne's work, it becomes something else. And while a line is sometimes just a line, Jackson is too interested in the natural world to ignore it. It keeps blooming. She's no latter-day Jackson Pollock who famously said, "I don't paint nature, I am nature." Jackson is like other star naturalists in that she's humble in her relationship to what nature itself can do and the grace life affords us in order to see it. Throughout her grand career, Jackson has worked with a certain boldness and hesitancy simultaneously. Maybe I don't mean hesitancy, but restraint, even when a piece is bursting at the seams with color, or not restricted by the canvas at all. In 2019, Jackson had her first solo show in New York. Titled News, the larger of the 12 pieces are what she calls, quote, anti-paintings, unquote, layers of built-up acrylic structured with netting, rods, and paper fragments. In other words, the acrylic is the canvas. To these surfaces, Jackson affixed different elements, bamboo, shells, seeds, and the like, and to enter the show was like entering a kind of fairyland, or a memory of the fairyland you dreamt of as a kid, and maybe even now. In many of her works, abstraction mixed with the figurative in the way that they do in dreams. Faces and bird figures suddenly emerge from the swath of color delicately placed. I think you want to enter Jackson's work bodily because she's lived in it so ardently before you got there, breathed it, told a story. And it's precisely that desire, the desire to speak, that accounts for the urgency in Firelei Báez's work, a world, a landscape that cannot and will not be contained by maps. Born to a Dominican mother and a Haitian father, Firelei's legacy from the first has been one that questions the very idea of place, of ownership. Who does the world belong to? The makers and keepers of maps, or the humans that account for its emotional geography? A world of emotions and customs and symbols that that the universe tells us nothing about because the world knows nothing about those bodies, bodies that Firelei has exploding out of mapped surfaces, a world of structures that tell us everything and nothing. In her essay on singing England for the first time, the Antiguan-born writer Jamaica Kincaid describes seeing England on a map in her classroom on that small island, but the beauty of the map doesn't describe the horrors within. bodies in transport, confused, torn from their native land, and then bodies used as trade. Those maps in Antigua didn't show any of that. And so when I first saw Baez's work and all those bodies and shapes rendered in earth-rich greens, deep earth purples, sometimes flying over God-forsaken seas in man-made maps, I saw, I think, for the first time perhaps, what the soul looks like as it struggles and erupts and turns and roils in its desire for now and always to be free, which is also the function of art and at the heart of being an artist. Thank you. And now I invite Firelei to come say a few words. Thank you.
Okay, and then we'll just jump right back. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out here. Usually in New York, I'll be like, thanks for braving the weather and making it out here. But it's like, thanks for leaving your beautiful landscape and just taking time to be in this dark room with me and seeing art. So I am one of the lucky people to be in this incredible collection that does the much needed and generous work of centering women artists and really reveling in how formative our work has been for the world at large. And so I am introducing the work that is highlighted here because Komal has another really favorite work of mine that is similarly of a similar ethos of centering women's work within a landscape. But here it's specifically two figures, and if you look closely when you see the show, it's actually three figures that are depicted. You see the arm of one of them peeking through that were never depicted. So these are the two daughters of the Haitian king during the Haitian Revolution, who King Henry Christophe and his son are beautifully depicted by the portraitist who painted Napoleon. There's that famous portrait of him standing gallantly. So he was brought over to the Caribbean and painted both of them, but there are no paintings at all of Queen Marie Louise or her two daughters, Amethyst and Athenaire. And as someone who came from those landscapes and experienced all the stories of growing up with that energy, I wanted to be able to, as an artist, somehow give a hint of who they were and how significant they were. And so this is supposed to reference, it's a lot of trompe-l'oeil around it, around the two portraits. The background is not shown here, but it was meant to reference the history of a particular, this is like a quick studio, a gesture towards the beautiful architecture that informed my upbringing. So in the north of Haiti, there is this gorgeous palace called Sans Souci, which means without a care. And if you think of the phrase now of like Black freedom and Black joy, what does it mean to establish a place of rest and respite? Now we're always in such a rush to get things done, but to center in a place that had been only thought of as a place of labor and consumption for a world at large, to declare this is going to be a place of rest and a pause for ourselves and by ourselves. What would that mean? And these two women in that space were central for refocusing the space of Saint-Domingue, which was in some surveys like 60% of the French economy. And then you think of Descartes and all the beautiful ideas coming out of specific landscapes and how enmeshed those two were. And so embracing ideas of liberation and of agency as a human in this modern world, a lot of times we forget that women were so integral to that. And I wanted to bring that back for not just, who we know, but who we don't know, and to manifest it and help see. There's so much that I feel, end up missing when we think of larger narratives, that we miss the grit that creates who we are. So in this piece, this was us. I had the portraits, but to create all this trompe-l'oeil, I had these wonderful young women helping me out. And this is the portraits without the ground. And as you see, there were these like washes of abstract color that informed the work. And it is a gesture that I follow through in a lot of this is a recent show that came down in Los Angeles. I usually start with this abstract gesture, this way of anchoring both my body and the space I'm making, because something that the pour does when you pour paint on the ground is that it gathers everything around it. It reflects the tilt of the floor, what little bugs are flying around, the dryness or the humidity in the air, and that ends up, for me, being kind of a very factual portrait of the present. And then from there, I can project onto these different spaces. And so that's why I like to anchor them a lot of times over historic documents, because we are so taught to think of things like maps and diagrams and schematics as truthful fact. And part of the project is to know that it's showing a sliver of that history. And a lot of times, certain people, certain bodies are not really represented fully. So how do you re-imbue that into them? How do you activate the unseen? And so these are things of becoming. I was actually in Somerset, England, around the same time last year when I was making these works or starting them. And it's this blooming profusion everywhere, a little bit like what you guys have right now. And it's this unbridled nature. But unlike here, England itself has been so cultivated for hundreds of years. So when you're driving down a street, it's a hedge that has been cultivated since the Elizabethan times. And it was a strange palimpsest for me to be driving on the wrong side of the road, on this beautiful profusion of flowers, and thinking how these two geographies were, where I came from and this island, knew and did not know of each other and affected each other, and just the vibration between them, I think, is what created these figures. And I wanted to be able to think of fate lines, timelines, how to pay homage to them, but also break them, and also different knowledge systems and different ways of protecting each other. I don't want to take up too much of the time, but I could go on forever. But just centering care, centering resilience, centering a sense of self that is, as the title of the show suggested, the fact that it amazes me does not mean I relinquish it. It's a line from Edouard Glissant on selfhood, on opacity, on navigating the world in terms that are more generous, so that to know each other, I don't have to perform my own autopsy to be valid in your eyes, and likewise, I don't have to perform your autopsy to be able to see you fully. So centering care and agency and opacity. And that was all. Thank you.
Thank you for being patient with me walking the long way, but I'm stiff from sitting too long. It's called age and glory. I'm really pleased to be here. This is quite amazing. I'm happy to be back in the Bay Area with my work. And I was just saying to Kamal that this is one of my favorite pieces because it accomplishes something that I've been working on with acrylic paint since the 1960s, and developing the paints and the mediums, first of all through figurative work, and then moving into shapes and being interested in paint and structure and what could I do with the pure acrylic. And this piece, cut slip for flowers. My titles come usually after the work or sometimes during the making of the work. I'm really fascinated by the circular images, spirals, and the unity that circles and roundness comes with it. This piece began in sections, of course, the two circular sections, and the acrylic has a life that expands with heat or with cold. And so I've been experimenting with the idea and playing with what structural things can happen with acrylic. And this piece was 2020, so it's a really early piece in my experimenting with lifting the paint up, hung in the air so that it's just pure paint. And I was able to just look at this piece for the first time in quite some time, probably since in a couple of years. And I was saying to Kamal, this is pure acrylic. And she said, oh, I don't know. So it turns out there are elements of, I don't throw things away. First of all, my whole work is trying to use those things that we put into the environment as well. And so structurally, in this piece, I've used produce netting from the produce bags that come with things like avocados, oranges, vegetables. And these are very delicate areas in the top part of this painting that help to structure the acrylic. So it's an early experimentation, but I think a more successful one in the sense that even the border, broad border at the top held by D-rings, these hang from the ceiling, and they're double-sided paintings. They've gone through a number of titles, my experimenting with the work. I no longer use the term anti-canvas. That was given to me by someone else. But environmental abstraction, ecological abstraction has been used for the work. I really am very concerned about those things that we return into the environment. And even the paint that I use, I recycle, reuse it. The water that I clean the brushes with also has medium, acrylic medium, and that goes back in working as if I'm working with a watercolor. So these are laid out as if they are watercolors, but with the same kind of thought that goes into making an oil painting. So I'm layering and layering paint that becomes structurally very strong in this work. So the details, I always love the details that people do of my work, because then I also look at them and try to find out what I've done. Each work is different. I have to go back, for example, even looking at the painting today was the first time in a long time. And I have to look each time, not with narcissistic attitude, but what did I do? How did I do this? Because each time there's a different approach and a different way of dealing with the paint. So I'm talking, tonight pretty much about this work, which I think was quite successful as a beginning work. And each time I want the work to be better and more beautiful. My interest, especially when I started painting here in the Bay Area, I never had art classes until coming to college at San Francisco State. And I love the Bay Area. I'm really happy to be back here. But growing up, when my parents moved here when I was a baby, 1944, and I've been infused with nature and the environment, the beauty of the Bay Area, the water, the natural life of animals that are here. I can't help myself. And then my parents moved to Alaska, and we moved. I grew up there. So going back and forth between these natural environments and living across the United States has been really important in my work. But I also was interested throughout moving from being a figurative painter, so-called figurative. I still think the word abstraction is very broad. Every time we lay down a paint stroke or put down color, it is an abstraction. Even if we're working, Sargent's work, I think were the most beautiful. If you look at a skirt, the end of a skirt, there are these beautiful brushstrokes that are abstraction. So it's a kind of broad term that everything we do, because it is not real, not reality, as an artist, I think, is an abstraction. But my interest, especially when I moved to Los Angeles, and it was right after the rebellions, the riot, and the fires in Los Angeles, most of the artists were responding to that aspect of the disasters that were happening there. I wanted to make work that was beautiful, make work to show also that there's beauty in people of color, there's beauty in blackness. The works that I'm doing now, you can look at them and interpret them in any way that no matter who you are, you can make a relationship to the work, I think. But I'm still interested in that relationship to the cultures that I come from, the indigenous and the African cultures, so that I'm approaching the work from the point of view of using everything. So I will not put paint down the drain. I pull the paint out of jars. I put it back in. All the leftovers, the extras that would go into the trash, go into the newest painting. So there's all sorts of stuff around my studio that I reuse. The building materials of my house, when I'm repairing the building, I can find ways of using those and structuring. This piece, especially cut slip for flowers, what made me so happy about it was the fact that even that top border is a really strong width of acrylic. Let me see, in the medium, just deer netting, produce bag netting, D-rings. So D-rings are a way of suspending and hanging the works from the ceiling. And I started hanging from the ceiling just because I needed more room in the studio. It's like when you work on the table, you work flat. I work both ways. I begin them on the table as if they're a watercolor, and then I will pull them up. And in the same way that I learned with oil painting, looking at the painting in all directions from all sides. But then the wonderful thing about these is to be able to walk around them and to see them from both sides. And I was interested in the idea that one side may have a certain kind of beauty and the other side has another beauty or not beauty. So many of the works that you'll see of mine are double-sided, and I don't know whether that's part of my Gemini modes. I'm not a Gemini, I'm an Aquarian, but I've got a lot of Gemini in me. So my friend Kenta always says that, my Gemini sides come out, that I'm doing double sides of everything. So I think maybe in our discussion we'll talk a little bit more about other work, and that's really all I want to say at this point. Thank you. I'm going to try to go down.
Thank you both for can you hear? You have to do that switch thing.
Hello? Oh, yeah.
Suzanne, do you see the switch?
There we are.
Press it up.
I'm supposed to be the theater person.
Yeah.
Here, I think over here.
These are new things.
They really are.
Newfangled stuff.
All the
Okay.
challenges.
Is that good? Great. I want to thank these wonderful artists for illuminating certain things. And I made a mistake. I forgot. I meant to correct it in the text when I said your dad was Haitian. He's actually of Haitian extraction, and so I wanted to make that distinction because the whole Hispaniola thing is so complex that you have to name people properly. So I apologize for that.
I think, part of being from Hispaniola is knowing that we exist in a spectrum fully.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but I wanted to say that.
Appreciate
And,
that. Thank you.
sure. I think that I wanted to begin. I'm one of those people who, as a kid, I always wanted to know the origin of things. I loved origin stories. Where did things begin? How did this plant happen? How did this book happen? I was reminded, Suzanne, when you were speaking of Juna Barnes, and she was entertaining a young person, and she was holding Nightwood, her famous novel, and she said that you have to excuse me, but how did I do this?
Yes.
How did I make this work?
Yeah.
And so when I'm sort of digging around vis-a-vis origin stories and how people began, it's to me like sort of entering a kind of a wonderful dreamscape about being an artist, and I like to follow. So I want to follow both of you tonight and just ask you this question of can you tell us a bit about, Suzanne, I'll ask you first about growing up in Alaska and then California, coming back and forth. You've mentioned this uh, about the natural world being very significant for you. I think also an element of the natural world that appears in your work over and over again is light. The ways in which light suffuses the object, illuminates your mind, and takes you to places in your imagination because it's sort of like following a road that's well lit. The light, of course, being different in Alaska than it is in California, but also suffusing flowers and people and the earth. So I just wanted to ask you about those early days in both places. I know that you were sketching already, drawing a bit
As a baby.
as a baby.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And as a baby in San Francisco, my parents came here, and I've learned so many things since I've become older, and since I have been living in the South, as a matter of fact. I've learned more about California and the West and our history
Yes.
since I've moved away, because we have such a diverse, population on the West Coast.
Yes.
So as a child, you grow up seeing, I because my first birthday was then it was called Chinese New Year. I thought I was Chinese for a long time. So, but my father and moved here because during World War II, and my uncles were living or were working. They were in the Navy on Treasure Island. When the war ended, well, my mother first would take me to Candlestick Park on the slide, the swing, and the sandbox as a baby. And then she took me with her to buy paint from a man in the Bayview district who made paint. I'd never seen, it was beautiful. It's probably the first time I had seen color and hue like that being mixed up. And then from my bedroom, I tell the story all the time, I could see San Bruno Mountain through my window. I was a little girl, so I wasn't allowed. We had a second-story apartment. I wasn't allowed to go down to play with the children. So I could see the sky. I could see the light. And then when I was older and my father was driving the trolleys and the cable cars, I would go with him. And he drove to Chinatown. He drove up to Coit Tower. And then he would take me out to the windmills on Great Highway and to the zoo. So I was drawing all those things. First, I was drawing and writing letters to my grandparents in St. Louis and ready to get my mother to keep me busy and out of her hair. But I think just seeing my father taking me everywhere around San Francisco and riding with him, on the cable car and the trolley. And, I go back all the way to being 9 months old, sitting in the back of a big old car and all you see as a baby in the car, you see the trees, and you see the things going by,
Yes.
the flashing light.
Yes.
I'm really recognizing all of that now. And then when my parents, my father went up to Alaska to help finish building the Alcan Highway.
Mm-hmm.
And then I missed him, and we went up to try it out and lived in a little cabin for a while. I never, it was really fun because there was no, right, running water. The refrigerator was a hole in the ice. And so just that environment, the change.
Yes. Yes.
Light, I've lived all over the United States, it feels like now. So light in every area of the United States is different.
Yeah.
Light in Alaska, and I think growing up there, you don't realize that, well, in summertime, it's light all day and all night till midnight.
Mm-hmm.
In the winter, it's dark, but it's gradual here. There's a gradual, and it seems darker here now to me than I remember growing up. But we were always busy. We were always doing things when I was in school. So that light, I don't know how much that difference of light affected me in Alaska, except that I could stay out in our front yard and draw and paint and play, when I was younger.
I love that the fact that one of the things that you're describing, whether or not, I think that often we're not aware of what we're describing, except in the heart.
Yeah.
And I think that what you're describing is that they created an atmosphere, your parents, your family gave you an atmosphere of play, that it was essential, that your imagination was an essential part
Yeah.
of your life. And I was wondering about Firelei here, the origin story about you becoming an artist. I won't. I'll pretend that I haven't read everything, just because we're not alone now. But I wanted to know how that began for you. That exploration of art as a way of, as you say, of healing. But I think it's also a way of, the paintings often seem to me to be essays about the ways in which this care has not taken place, but you're reinventing it for yourself.
Thank you for your beautiful writing.
Oh, thank you.
It's very generous for you to give room to the idea that I could be as brilliant in the execution of language, and I there are things that I can do in paint that I cannot do in language. So I will try to
Don't
explain.
ask me to paint, though.
Okay, that's good. We can be a bridge.
No, yeah, exactly.
So
Angela Davis says that you can always build a bridge.
Yes.
Yes.
So the origin of the work, I grew up with very creative people
Mm-hmm.
out of necessity and out of want, and similar to Suzanne's experience, they're in Spanish. Maybe it's only Dominican Spanish. They would have a thing for the kids called tente allá, which basically means they would send you to another adult and say, it translates to keep me here. And so there were a lot of tente allá tasks that would then extend to, as a child, just making idle play.
Yes.
And so we would be sent to the countryside, and the grandmothers, the aunts would all be busy doing their thing, and they would send you to do something, and suddenly you can create a world in the backyard. And that felt like such abundance that I took for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a way of being and of just having an ease of manifesting physically
Mm-hmm.
because of that generosity. So comfort was always making something or transforming the environment around me, to kind of anchor. Someone would say stimming, but that's a limited way of seeing you're navigating a physical presence. Yeah.
Right. That one of the things, that attitude gives the child is an awareness that it has value, that the imagination has value, and that you try things, and no one is laughing and no one is criticizing. They're just letting you do. And I think that when I first saw your work and Suzanne's, the link for me was I just knew that the work wasn't born out of trouble, that it was born out of a desire to communicate, first of all, but secondly, this, the fertility of the imagination, that this was one mode of expression. And I wanted to ask you both this question because you're both socially very responsible people. I wanted to take the audience back a little ways to when Suzanne had a gallery in Los Angeles. um,
Studio. My studio.
well, she's being modest, but what happened was that what had happened was that she wanted to share space with other artists in Los Angeles at that time. And one of the ways that she could do that was to exhibit the work of other artists, herself and other artists, but mostly really looking at other people.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you get off the hook with this, Suzanne.
Oh.
And so she had a family. She was working hard to make a community happen, a community of people who she'd gone to learn drawing with Charles White, etc. People that you had met in Los Angeles at that time. What was that impetus for you, Suzanne, to be in a community with other artists?
When I arrived in Los Angeles, I had just come back from South America because I was hired as I was a ballet dancer, and I was hired by Sacramento Music Circus to work there, and then that became Music Theater USA. I went to South America, moved to Los Angeles. You can't take the bus to get to ballet class. You have to go to Beverly Hills. In San Francisco, in Oakland, Bay Area, you catch the bus, the BART, everywhere, the Muni. So I ended up, I was looking for studio space. And I was taking the class. There was one person who said, you got to take class from Charles White. He was telling me everything. There's the Watts Festival. You should put your paintings in the Watts Festival. I didn't know anyone. I knew 3 people when I moved to Los Angeles. And just very quickly, because I took the class with Charles White, I met David Hammonds and Dan Conchalar. And I asked, I need a studio space, and I'm looking for a big space. They were all working in their kitchen tables and working in graphic design. And I come from the Bay Area aesthetic of get a loft, get a place in the, on the wharf to work.
With air, yeah.
Yeah, and so I found this beautiful space that reminded me of a hotel we stayed in Montevideo called La Alhambra, and it was the Granada Buildings. And I've been very fortunate in the sense that, I guess out of naivete, I go places and look for where I think it's beautiful, not realizing that there may be some restrictions because I'm a little brown girl. And I just go in and, I told the woman, this is, I'm going to have a gallery. It's a studio. I just kept, because it was a business building, really. But then when I moved in, David Hammonds came around, Timothy Washington, and they said, you got this big space. And I said, no, this is my studio. I didn't really want to share. I really didn't. And then just out of, I don't know, they said, well, let us use the space. And one of my classmates from San Francisco State, I actually had, David Swanson, and then a jewelry maker who was a friend of his from Santa Barbara, and then Timothy Washington. I said, okay, you can have a show. And then we didn't know what we were going to do for the second thing because I wasn't really planning. And Greg Edwards took that. Greg Edwards, who was Mel Edwards' baby brother, I knew their sister. Yeah. That was the third person I knew was Anne, their sister, and 2 other friends. And Greg took that fabulous photo of us sitting in the lobby. Yeah. It turns out Annie Bianucci and George Evans were in my watercolor class with Noel Quinn. And so I said, well, we'll do a watercolor show. That was one of the only times that I'd really shown at Gallery 32.
Well, so I think you're burying something quite important here. You can hit me later. She did a show called The Sapphire Show.
Oh, that, and
And it was
Yeah.
it's almost a sort of, it's wonderful that we can talk about it in the relation to this show.
Yeah.
This show, again, we're talking about women artists who are not in the margins because their parameters are so wide and so big. And the Sapphire Show, which presented black female artists, including Senga Ngundi and Betty Saar. You also, there was something very profound that happened that I feel is profound. And this is talking about the ways in which race and gender can be freed of ideology. And I just want to read something that you wrote.
Oh.
This is in response to the Black Panther Minister of Culture, Emory Douglas's portraits of other Black Panther leaders. Jackson wasn't very concerned with her gallery's so-called, well, let's pretend it wasn't a gallery, okay? Success. What interested her was getting the Black community involved, I think, in that space. And the Panthers accused her of a lack of didacticism and purpose. And Suzanne wrote, the critic wrote this poem, Statement 1971. Do you mind if I read a little bit?
No, that's a privilege considering you're such an incredible writer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Suzanne wrote, you say the people have no capacity for filling in or for making new images within their own minds when they look at art, that the people should not be allowed to delve into fantasies which might relate to their own reality more than to yours.
I love the way you just read that because that piece, when I wrote it, could be read across the lines and down the line.
Yes.
That's a privilege. I mean, this is Hilton Als, right?
It's a privilege. It's the privilege to. I wanted to bring this up only because you've brought it up in your introduction, and you were talking about the ways in which the culture, your culture, the many places that you have thought about and lived, the ways in which your life has embraced a lot of different things. You want to make art that, or have made art that really synthesizes those experiences. And I wanted to say one more thing, just to completely wreck our friendship, and say Suzanne had another life, and that was as a costume designer. So, set designer as well. So she was the first woman of color to graduate from Yale School of Drama in costume design. And when you think about this idea of not throwing things away, of using everything, I want to stress, as a former theater critic, what I see in the work as well is someone who has an abundant imagination about play and how play can be manifest. So that poem to me is about the importance of play.
When we put together the Sapphire Show, we were upset because the Kardashian Foundation had an exhibition with male artists and only one woman artist. And we had never heard of that woman, but it was Alma Thomas. And we just quickly, Betty Saar sang, we all put it together. And I'd actually had a show with Sanga's cousin, Eileen Abdul Rashid, and Yvonne Cole Mayo and Elizabeth Lee Taylor. We had the women in succession. But I totally forgot about the Sapphire Show. I didn't even remember the date because at the time I was engaged to be married and I was thinking more about that. And it happened in a weekend, 4th of July. And I didn't realize that until Otis Art redid that show. Yeah. But to make that Kamal, to think what Kamal is doing, yes, and that little show, and I didn't even think about it. And I don't know where the Kamal, I'm sure you may have, we're both Aquarians. Yes, we yes. do these things. What I'm trying to say
is that a line exists,
yeah,
between that show and what Kamal has done in this show.
Well, that's what I just realized, yes, you're saying. Yeah. I mean, I didn't think about it at the time.
I did.
And, well, it's just things happen. And, my
pulling your
studio
leg.
space became a gallery space,
Yes.
but it was not intended.
No, because
We were
this
just
is
doing things.
well. This is again. This comes back to the spirit of improvisation that you've been talking
Yes.
about. That
Yes.
the making of something happens in the making of it, not in
Yes.
pre-planning or a design. And I think that one of the things that I wanted to ask you again. This is about social responsibility or the feeling of being involved with community. Is it something that you are aware of while you're making the work, or is it something that happens after the work is done that you want to invite community in?
I mean, first, underlining how at ease you are with an abundance mindset, that these are things that you do from being boundless. I think a lot of people, when they are boundless, they feel rudderless, and it's a matter of rightful navigation. So when you're like, I was taking care of my engagement, and by the way, I was changing history at the same time, it's just par for the course. It's just the thing you do. And when you were saying you wanted this space to make, you didn't think of it first like, oh, and it could also serve as all these different things. The first priority is, how will I enact in the world physically? For me, it's always, how can I create, because part of that creative play became also adjacent to survival. There was chaos, there was all this other tumult, and it was a place to anchor
This is in the family
in the
home.
family or the country. Like, as you were saying, Saint Domingue, Dominican Republic, it's always been a place of slippage, if you can just have one word. But I always felt anchored in making, and it's first that, and then after is the place of convening, of bringing people in, of making room for others. And I wish that it was the inverse. But I think that's where her poem came through. Like, first you prioritize fantasy and a boundless space, and then that gathers up into a shared thing. Yeah, exactly.
It's a
Yes.
spiritual practice, and the thing that, if I may build a bridge between writing and the visual arts, is that the I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel protected when I'm making things, only because it's not just me talking to myself. It's all the years or the weeks and days and the experiences of sitting here with you guys. And I think the trick, if there is a trick to it, and it's not really a trick, but to remain porous despite pain, despite awkwardness, despite the unfairness of things, to remain porous to the experience of sitting here or looking at these flowers or looking at the light. It's essential to our understanding of who we are as artists. Because once you shut that down, then you're out of business. I wanted to ask you guys another question. I know we have to take some questions. Margot's being adorable over there. Um, um, although I want to just talk specifically about this because it was something that was really fascinating me when I was looking through your images. Obviously, the work you guys do is very different, but I'm fascinated by the sculptural elements in both, because Firelei's just made her first sculptural piece, and it was in one of the images there. And the acrylic pieces, for me, have that feeling, very much so, of something that even if you don't have any room in the studio, it's hanging as an object that I would like to embrace in some way, or walk around, or look through one side and another. And I wanted to just ask about this, and I was thinking about Mr. Mink's Confusion, for instance, something that you've worked on for 20 years. It's a piece that you keep adding to and changing. What is it about the dynamism of sculpture that has appealed to you was it a way of having a 3D version of the figures that are in the paintings, or?
I think we should start with beauty
Oh.
here.
When I was a student at San Francisco State, I was making sculpture. And then my mother said, those things are too big and ugly to be in my house. She only liked the pretty plaster ones.
What were the sculptures like?
They were, we would go to the dump, or I don't know what they call them here then in the 60s, the rubbish place, and to get stuff and make work. And
Recycling.
recycle. Well, they weren't recycled then.
No.
It was piles of. We'd go to the dump and get stuff and make them. So they were wood and they were added on. But the pieces my mother liked were the ones that I actually made an armature and used paper towels and plaster and made this wonderful figure that she kept on the front porch of our house on Ocean Avenue. That was okay because it was lovely and it was traditional looking. So I've had sculpture in my spirit all along, but also even on the surface of painting and wanting to prove that painting was not dead. I also began to, especially seeing Mary Lovelace O'Neill's work,
Yes.
I was looking at the structure of the paint and that as a physical architectural
Yes.
form.
Yes.
And then eventually this has just evolved, and wait till you see my commission piece. We call it the Monster.
Yeah.
It's paint and physical sculpture and moss and things from nature
Yes.
that have just spilled over from my interest in the environment and the materials. So, and that's
Yes.
gone from this double-sided, all acrylic work to then also adding other elements. It's just I think I have to challenge myself.
Yes, of
And
course.
challenge myself architecturally,
Yes.
structurally, because I love architecture as well.
Well, it's interesting. You're reminding me of a wonderful, when Imam Baraka wrote Dutchman, his first play, he said he wanted the poetry to move, that he loved writing poems, but the theater was about getting the poetry to move, to have action. And when I looked at your first brass sculpture, it was to me a lot about movement and about sort of making another dimension to the figures that I'd seen in some of the paintings. Did you feel that?
It is. So the thing about the studio is that it's this mad laboratory where I get to play, and so sculpture has been a constant thread from like childhood objects that I would assemble to environments that I would assemble. So it's this negotiating of what I think is ready to speak in the world. So there are all kinds of 3D things in the studio. The bronze came out of trying to get a physical version of the figures that they were inspired. I have 3. So this was the first one that I showed.
That's the one I've seen.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So in the next spring, I'm showing 2 other
Okay,
ones.
great.
But try to translate a painting to a sculpture. And there are things that you do in 2-dimensional pictorial work that defy gravity and that are just impossible. And you don't realize just how much until you try to make something in it. Every small gesture is 75 pounds. That sculpture was 2 tons.
Wow.
And to make it feel as light and as active as a painting, I had to negotiate reality. And that meant, how do you make a very stable triangle still feel like it's dancerly, like it's in motion? And that meant working with models so that I can sketch and carve the tension in the muscles. Because if I were to just cast a body, it would, when you cast, the body relaxes and
Yes.
that tension goes away. So
Yes.
you have to almost exaggerate every gesture.
Yes.
And I was always fascinated by palm trees and hurricanes and how they're just so flexible and they're graceful, but also it's just aggressive and like all
Yes.
that tension is included in it.
Yes.
And I was at a Headlands residency back in 2013 that had these beautiful palm trees, and I thought, how can you exist in this colder landscape? So it
Yes.
started this conversation of like, you're so beautiful and robust. How are you here alive? And they became these painted figures that when people look at them, they think, oh, she's Caribbean. These are Caribbean paintings. But they were from a San Francisco landscape.
Wow.
And yeah.
See, that's the wonderful thing about the imagination and making things is that it always begins as somebody else's idea. Your point of the point of the for the artist is just to make the thing, and the ideas are incorporated or whatever, and whatever is seen, as Suzanne indicated in her talk, is up to you. But it's the making, and it's allowing the imagination and remaining porous to this experience of making. It's quite a it's difficult and it's an extraordinary thing, and also you do feel protected by it. I think
Questions?
questions. I know this is Northern California, so everybody wants their white wine pretty soon. um, so to wrap it up, tell me what you're thinking and what you would like to ask this wonderful artist. We're so lucky to have them. There's a microphone over here, and I think you had your hand up. Yes, she right there, right here.
Hi, this has been wonderful. Thank you all. We haven't heard anything about color, and for both of you, color is so central and so distinctive. And I just wonder if we could have a word or two from each of you about your sense of color and kind of the genesis, where that came from. Thank you.
So the question is on color.
Color.
Color
How are you
and how it
using-
influences both of us.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm trying to decide whether I'm
Yeah.
going deaf or not.
So,
No.
no, there's a reverberation in the space. I can speak briefly on that. I remember for me, color was this intense awareness of saturation, and the light in the Caribbean is like this intense light, and things are just really vibrant. And I remember when I first went to New York to go for undergrad, and the plane was landing, and I saw this seascape of brown brick, and I was like, what is this? How am I going to live? And so a lot of the painting became about remembered color and how to imbue the experience of it. There's a mosaic I did in New York. You're going 3 stories down underground, and I wanted you to feel like you were under a certain sunlight. And that required, it was actually made in Germany. So I had to go to Germany and be like, no, this is very elegant, very muted color, but that's not it. We're going to see how to punch it up. So figuring how to navigate these chromophobic spaces, like we are by design. I mean, there's so many studies now saying that collectively we're losing our sense of sight, and the materials we use are becoming more and more monochromatic, and there's a certain comfort in that monochrome, but there's also just like a certain reveling that we miss out on. So how to navigate both, how to resaturate our experiences.
In the gay world, it's called beige queens. Yeah.
Well, we were talking earlier because I usually wear a lot of color, and I packed my suitcase quickly from several places, had all these wonderful things in, and then I ended up putting all black on because I'm always saying to in New York, everybody's dressed in black. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I had a lot to eat this month or this week, so. But I agree. I mean, this is something.
But it's not. I think we did answer it a little bit. I take a little slight umbrage at her accusation that we didn't talk about it because
Okay. I didn't
because
hear
we
her
did
say it,
we
so I
did
didn't
talk
hear the
about it in vis-a-vis light.
Yeah, light and color, because color, even sitting in this room and seeing 1,000 different blacks, and as having been a theater person, I'm always looking what's going on with the lights and what's going on and how things reverberate and how things change. And in my studio, sometimes things seem darker and duller, and then there's a painting in an exhibition that in New York, now it's Salon 94.
Yes.
It's in a room with brown walls, 1970s brown walls, and the painting just lights up
Yeah.
Clothes.
in the strangest way that it did not in my studio. And the studio was the northern studio where the white walls are very
Yes.
white, and I
Yes.
don't like that. And it was such a surprise to see that change, so that even in this painting, um, according to where it's hung, if it's hung in front of a window, the color and the light changes, and that's part of the excitement
The
of it.
experience, yes.
It's really sort of wonderful.
I love also talking to women about lighting. I have to say, I have many, because they, exactly.
Yeah.
Would you like to go here for dinner? No, that lighting.
Impressive lighting. What is it?
And I don't.
Yes.
It can be hung on any window. The way my works are, they've been in a number of experiences. No, this acrylic paint is very strong. It can be, and this is double-sided. In the catalog, it's going to be hung the other way. It doesn't matter. You can hang it where you love it,
Where does
and
it
where
look
the
good in
light
your
goes
house?
through.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's safe.
Yes. Hello. There's a question here. Oh, wait. Sorry. What? I'm sorry, miss. One second.
Last question.
Okay.
Here you go.
Suzanne, I first saw your work for the very first time that I know of at Making Their Mark in January.
At where?
Making Their Mark in New
Oh.
York in January of 2024.
Uh-huh.
And I went back to that show 4 times. And then I've seen it here many times. But when I first saw your work from across the room, and it was actually a north window, if you want confirmation.
Heartily in agreement. Yeah.
I walked towards the piece. It was so amazing, and I'm like, I'm sure this is an artist that was born in the 1990s, right? And so I look at the piece. I thought it was some young kid's really amazing experiment with materials and the idea of painting. And I was like, wait a second, how come I've never seen this work before? And then I went, well, she probably made it in the 70s or the 60s. And then I saw it was a recent work. And so one of the things I want to ask is, as an artist that's been working for decades, how do you keep it fresh and pushing your ideas the way you are?
It's challenge, and if you notice, they're all one of a kind. So it's just challenging. The piece of sculpture that I've just finished was a challenge because I may not have been, and I also, it's very odd to, when I first started as a young artist and was with the gallery, the works were being sold very quickly. And now the same thing is happening in a way, and you don't want to repeat yourself, and so you're challenged to find what's the next thing. As I was saying, architecturally, I'm interested in architectural structure because of growing up in San Francisco and seeing architecture here, and all the places I've lived. And my father, obviously being interested, even though he was a realtor, he should have been an architect. So structural things for me are important. So that pushes me. So even with the acrylic, I'm kind of at a standstill right now because I finished for 2.5 years working on the piece of sculpture that is so different from everything that you see here, but it incorporates elements that are the same. And then there's some side pieces that are structural that hang on the wall individually, that play with materials differently, and on armature differently. But right now, I'm wondering what am I going to do next when I finally get the retrospective open and get stuff out of 2 studios so I have room. And also traveling to some other places. I have a show in Brussels. I'm hoping that's going to give me energy. I'm having energy this week because I'm here. I'm with you. That's going to be very helpful.
Also, the part of your question, I think, is how do you stand the business of it, right? When you're not being taken care of for a long period of time. Is that what you're also asking?
You mean from the beginning?
How do you keep momentum when you don't necessarily have an audience all the time?
I was fortunate, I think, in my generation. What we learned, and I learned here in the Bay Area about becoming an artist. Most of my peers and the people that I studied with kind of put it in your head that you work and you work and you make the work better, and you don't have an MFA show that's advertised in the magazine, and you don't have an exhibit in a gallery right away, even though I was really fortunate when I moved to Los Angeles. Well, Larry Walker actually curated my first solo exhibition at University Pacific.
This is
And
Kara Walker's father.
yeah, and E.J. Montgomery invited me to be in the show at the Oakland Museum.
Yeah.
So I was really fortunate as a 20-year-old to have some really positive experiences. But for me, those were ways to work up to now. I'm finally getting that. The way we were taught was that when you become an older, mature artist, you've really worked through all of these
Yes.
ways. And I've been learning how to paint all my life.
That's right.
So I've just learned how to do something that is my own, that is my that no one else has done, that is my mature work.
And it's not anyone else's narrative, but yours. You can't follow someone else's.
Yeah, but I
dreaming.
had to go
Someone
through
else is
all these
dreaming.
things.
Yeah.
I was exhibiting all along. We all exhibit. We're in shows. We support one another as artists. But and I don't think most artists. There's something new in the newer generations where they expect. When I was teaching, I'd say, "What do you think? What passion do you have about the work?" The guys would raise their hands thinking lust. The women were thinking, "Oh well." But passion is about the work and making it, and that's more important than anything. And if you really care about your work, you're disciplined, you focus, you stay, and you don't have to have big recognition and success, whatever that word is.
No, but I think that this is something that has been important to me my entire life, which was the recognition was someone else's afterthought. The thing that was super important to me always was to connect with other artists.
Yes.
And that's the community was really the sustenance for me.
Yeah.
The other stuff was an accident. But the things that really were so important to me was that if Suzanne liked me or Jamaica liked me or whatever, that was the sustaining principle for me. It wasn't that I'm going to get something out of this situation. I'm not a cunning person. I don't know how to do that. But what I do know how to do is to be porous to the experience of friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the support of our, us peers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, I'm this age. I always thought I was the same age as everyone. And it turns out my friends who are 100 years old now, they're all passing and people are going away. And it's, I'm realizing I'm still younger, even at this old age.
It's true. There was a wonderful woman, Barbara Epstein, who was a co-founder of the New York Review of Books, and wonderful woman, very funny. And she hung out with us.
Yeah.
We were 20 or whatever, 30-year-olds. And someone said, Barbara, don't you realize that you're 40, 50 years older? And she said, no, because when I started going to parties, I was the youngest person in the room. So it stays the same, I think, for all of us. But listen, go drink your wine. This has been a fabulous occasion with these two. Thank you, too.
This is an honor to be with you. Wonderful company. Thank you.